No, that's not a bad idea. I mean, what's the purpose of it being 70 degrees in October if we're not outside? So, I mean, Brown County has an amphitheater, right? We could do the next one like stadium style, right? Can right do like an amphitheater. There's one in Brown County. Could live my rock star fantasy.
Oh boy.
So the question is, do you go the Steven Tyler route or the Axl Rose? Maybe full Commodores, but I'd need the afro
I
back.
go for David Bowie.
I can't pull off Ziggy Stardust. You'll have to do Bowie.
Okay.
All right. Let's go ahead and get started here. All right. We've been at this for 8 years. Let's see if we can get it on the first try. Good morning. Hey, Stacy. Morning, everybody. My name is Fred Van Dorp. I am the Accounting and Reporting Director with the Indiana State Comptroller's Office. Is Elise still inside? Okay. So while she's not here, I want to thank her for her kind words. She's always been such an advocate for the local government division and such a huge supporter of some of the changes that we are looking at trying to do. Some of those we'll cover today. Some of those we will cover in future presentations, but it has been fantastic to get such overwhelming support on things that we are proposing to try to make this process a little bit easier. Death and taxes, but hopefully death, taxes, and improvements. It is good to be back in the office. It feels like some of the things that we had started so many years ago have continued to progress and evolve. Coming back from the Department of Local Government Finance, hopefully I've brought back a bit of a different perspective, a little bit more context, a better understanding of this process that should hopefully be of use to our office and hopefully still of use to yours. There have been some changes since last time I left. I feel like there's a tremendous swell of pride that the presentation that we're about to go through, the two separate presentations that Janie and I are about to go through, were ready on Monday and available and posted on the website, so all of that information is available to you. That was not my strong suit on the first time go around, but hopefully we can continue to improve in that as well. While I've always built those presentations a little bit late, I generally used my trip in to the county to figure out what you do for an introduction. How do we get started with our presentation topics? And I am, after exploring a lot of Martin County, I don't have much of an introduction planned. All I'm feeling is nostalgia. There's our quick show of hands. How many people are either in their last term or planning an exit at the end of this particular cycle? That is too many hands of people that I've always enjoyed seeing at the conferences. Well-earned breaks, well-earned transitions into the next phase of your lives. But know that you'll be missed on this side of the microphone and have always appreciated the friendship and the warmth when we've presented or when we have reached out with questions or as we've tried to roll out for other upgrades to try to improve the process. So thank you for your time. Have always appreciated all the support. So the presentation we're about to give is really split into two groups, which is a little bit of a refreshing change since we've come back. Going to go about 10 or 15 minutes with some of the changes we're going to see for the upcoming settlement process, changes we're going to see for the next 6 weeks, some that we'll see in the next 6 months, and then we're going to end with two of the larger changes that we're looking at proposals. A couple of areas relating to settlement that I'd like to spotlight or draw specific attention to, just easy things I think we will be able to take care of, but priorities or things we'll have on our radar in the upcoming. Janie has got the heavy lifting. She'll be going about 35 to 45 minutes, really doing a deep dive into two aspects of the excise, which is, if I can steal just a little bit of your thunder, we know that excise is an area that your association has shared is an area that we can do more training on. So this is not designed to be excise from beginning to end. This is not the only presentation we'll give on excise. But I think it's an important one to sort of start the ball rolling, especially as it relates to the settlement. Excited about both versions of the presentation. All right. So there's 4 bullets on the slide, and let's work our way through these. The first one, as it relates to upgrades and changes to the settlement procedures that you're going to be seeing beginning this December, relates to just how we're submitting. For the last few years, and for the last few years, and we'll get into the history just a little bit, a settlement has been submitted through the comptroller's FTP site. Beginning in December, that FTP site is being phased out. Instead of putting the documents into the site where we can go out and grab them to begin the review, we're asking you just to email those in. Let us cut down the time it takes for us to be notified that the documents are available, and let's just put those documents directly into the comptroller's hands or into Janie and my hands. Historically, that site got rolled out about 8 years ago when the state really tightened down the security, the security they were using. For those of you that remember, there was a time when the abstract was a spreadsheet, not a program, and that was a macro-enabled spreadsheet. When the state's Information Office of Technology decided that there was recognized that there was a potential risk at sharing macro-enabled files back and forth, they prevented those files from being emailed in. So the workaround, the only way we were able to collect that information was creating this external site that you could reach on your end and we could reach on ours. But since the abstract has transitioned to Gateway, that requirement was no longer serving any function. So one of the last things that we'll do as we finish that transition is this is what has given us the ability to pivot back to just emailing those files back and forth. On our end, it puts the files into our hands a little bit quicker. On your end, it's hopefully you'll see that same sort of turnaround. Quicker feedback. If there is a file missing, if there is something that we can identify, we should be able to cut down on the time we spend reviewing because we can get the files quicker. But there are two caveats or two sort of hotspots as we relate to that sort of change. One deals with the completeness of the submission. We know that settlement isn't one document, it's multiple documents that we'll be sharing. When the settlement comes in, the request will be to be complete. Everything that we need to review coming in on that first try. If we start having to go back and forth as to, I need this spreadsheet, bless you, or I need that spreadsheet, we won't recognize the time savings. So the message for you to bring back to your office is that before you submit, let's make sure you have all the documents that are ready, send those into the office. The second caveat or the second hotspot is if we do find ourselves in the position where during the course of the review there is one field on one form that needs to be updated, what we're going to ask you for is a complete resubmission. So it's not just I fixed this one form and we send it in, and between the two versions we have everything that we need. Each communication, if we're doing another review, every review if we get into how the state works on its settlement review, every time documents come in, we validate everything just to make sure that this has the questions we ask will contain everything that we found. And so when there are corrections that come in, we need to recheck everything to make sure something else hasn't broken. We're trying to show you everything that we know is wrong, but when it comes back in, we need to make sure that everything is being re-reviewed. So when the first submission comes in, we want to make sure it's complete. If we start going back and forth, each subsequent submission should also be a complete resubmission of all forms that need to go through the review. Means that at the end of this, we will have a single email that contains all the forms we reviewed, all the forms we approved, and so we don't have to go across multiple emails to be able to provide that. Still expecting there to be a time savings here, and still expect there to be a time savings with this particular upgrade. Okay. Number 2 is direct communication. We know that for almost half a decade, the Comptroller's Office has been partnering with Crow to perform the review of your settlements. We've set up the parameters, we've set up the checks, we've set up the tools that they use, but after we finish our preliminary review, we're handing it over to them for the extra set of hands and the folks in their office to go through that deeper dive. Historically, what Crow has done is if they've identified anything, they have discussed with us what they have found, and then we will reach out to the county to collect answers, and then we sort of start this dance all over again. Beginning in December, you'll be receiving communications directly from Crow. Right? So those emails we will share the 3 or 4 people that they generally have associated with it. If you get those emails relating to your property tax settlement, know that those are valid emails, valid questions directly from our partner. Just like with the first upgrade, we are hoping that by not removing the Comptroller's Office from the process, but removing us as a bottleneck where they are asking us questions, we are asking you questions. You are giving us answers. We are sharing those answers. We can just get through the process a little bit faster. Question directly to the county, answers directly to Crow, trying to get to that pre-approval as easily and as straightforward as possible. We'll send out the listing of the names of the people and the email addresses that they'll be responding to. Just know that that'll be a bit of a change. You should see the same format. You should see the same questions. They still work with us very closely, but instead of putting us in the middle, directly from the folks that are reviewing it. Number 3. And so, well, what is it? About $10 billion is going to go through the settlement process. More often than not, the questions that we're asking relating to settlement largely focus on the tiny little bottom corner of that section C of your settlement form. Bless you. Questions about the various remittances that are coming to the state. And it's probably worthy of its own sort of full-length conversation about what those fines and fees are, what they represent, and how they're used. But at a high level, what we've created, or what the state's created, is a system by which the counties are remitting a single amount to the comptroller's office, but while we will end up doing the deposit, that money doesn't necessarily come to us. On your behalf, we are sending that money to the Department of Local Government Finance. We're sending that to the state police. You remit it to us, and we deposit it with the agencies at the state. So instead of you writing 7 different checks to 7 different agencies, you just have to send it to us. We know that section has historically led to agencies asking us, why is the number up? Why is the number down? We, on your behalf, are answering those questions. So the questions you're getting from us, we are largely asking on behalf of the agencies that are actually benefiting from the money that you're sending up to the state. Okay. If that's the intro, the reason why I bring it up is the spreadsheet that we have been using to actually validate the numbers that you have been sending in is now available to you. We will be posting that online. It is a way for you to know exactly what questions we're going to ask about the dollar amounts that you're planning to remit before it ever makes it to us. And so what we have compiled is activity from your last 5 years of settlements. So we can tell you that in 24, in 23, and 22, here's how much you have historically submitted. And so if the number that you are planning on submitting this fall exceeds the 20% threshold, we will be trying to get that information to you in advance. It is not a required spreadsheet that you have to file. You don't have to use it, but it is as close to us being as transparent as we possibly can be. So if the number is up, if the number is down, if the submission already comes with an explanation of, yep, ran the report, know that it's 22% higher and here's what that is associated with. Yep, we know that that is 26% lower, but we've already looked into it. We've cut down the question that you know we're going to ask, the answer that you know you're going to provide. Gets us closer to one submission, one response from our office. Not a required spreadsheet, but it is a new tool that we're trying to do to be as transparent with how we're reviewing. So we're just going to turn over the same tool that we use so that you have it in your office. Next spring, we'll load in more information and we'll post a new version of this one. We'll just keep doing this so it is available to you. The last one is not as ready as I was hoping it would be, but a direction that we are moving in. Well, Janie will get into the details of how it works, what it does, why we do it. There's one particular settlement worksheet that I have got squared away in my sights, and that's the excise allocation spreadsheet. When that was originally sort of transitioned in 06 from its old form to its new form, there were some decisions made by a young fella who had a lot to learn. What we're looking at is sort of a 2-prong update to the spreadsheet. The first one is to start to incorporate the 3-digit taxing district description in. So same recipients, but instead of just having the description of the taxing district, incorporating that 3-digit number, we think will make it a little bit easier to map or to work with your tax and billing vendors to know exactly which geographic area that portion of the excise sheet is looking for. We've got about, I think, 80 counties transitioned over, but there were a handful of counties where it was a little bit difficult to make an exact match for that transition. And post-settlement, we'll end up reaching out to figure out exactly how we should end up renaming those. Once that's ready, we'll be able to roll it out this spring or for the spring settlement. Once that portion is done, we will have everything we need to rebuild the sheet. And while Janie will get into the details of the format, I think there are some pretty common sense improvements we can make to just how the sheet itself is laid out. Upgraded on this end, hopefully be able to expedite it on your end. Just a little bit more clear as to what it is we're trying to collect and how we're collecting that information. So 3 of those are upgrades and things you're going to be able to see beginning this December. One of those, I just needed a little bit more time to be able to land that particular plane. All of these areas are just, we think, are easy improvements that we can make to the process itself. Now, from a spotlight standpoint, I want to talk about sort of 2 specific areas. First one, while settlement is largely the collection and distribution of property tax and excise at a local level, want to touch base and just continue to reinforce that even after the local distributions are done, even after you've made it through and your forms have been validated for consistency across, the state is also using the settlement as a sort of a stopgap measure, a tool to make sure the money collected at a local, good catch, the money collected at a local level is also being remitted to the state. So even after you've made it through, your forms have been submitted, you've received that notification of pre-approval, there are still 4 remittances that we're going to be collecting from the counties. Now, the first 2, the fines and forfeitures and the judge's supplemental, those are not late yet. But while they have largely been sort of coupled with settlement, the sooner we can collect that money with the deadlines on the screen, the less likely that we're going to end up holding up the settlement procedures because of money that we could potentially have collected early. Wanted to sort of reemphasize the deadlines associated with both of those. For the bottom 2, the state's portion of the excise and the fines and fees, just making sure that we are on pace to collect that information by June 30th for the spring settlement and December 31st for the fall settlement. So just even after the forms are done, there's still that last step of making sure that the state's portion of any of these distributions work their way up. The next sort of spotlight area is kind of an odd one, but it's happened more than once, and so wanted to talk about it with this particular group. We know that there's money being remitted to multiple state agencies, including but not limited to the Comptroller's Office and State Board of Accounts. Occasionally, money that is supposed to go to Board of Accounts will make it to our bank account, or money that's supposed to go to the Board of Accounts bank account, or is supposed to come to our bank account, is working its way to Board of Accounts. When we are in the middle of settlement, when we are working on reviewing those forms and getting that information back to you, trying to partner with Board of Accounts to figure out, are we holding money that you were expecting, or asking them, do you have money that was supposed to come to us? We know that those examination of records fees are supposed to go to Board of Accounts. Just, if you will, make sure to work with your treasurer that money is making its way to the correct agency. While we work very closely with the Board of Accounts, this will slow down our momentum. Will take us away from the actual reviewing of the settlement as we are looking for dollars that have made it to the right entity, but not necessarily to the right access. We know that 364 days of the year, we start our day by opening up our bank account, right? Just finding out if there's any money that we need to deposit. This just puts us in the best position to be able to focus on the settlement questions, as compared to sort of tracking down some of these dollars. So wanted to spotlight that as an area we want to focus on for the upcoming settlement. All right. So if that is what we're going to see for the next 6 weeks, let's talk about some of the upgrades we're going to see for the next 6 months, or 2 major upgrades we want to see for the next 6 months. The first one relating to the Comptroller's external website, and I think Elise teed this up nicely. And now that Dan Shackle is not here, I can say this about the Department of Local Government Finance: wildly envious of their website. It has more information, it has more resources. It can be used for both local government and for taxpayers to get a better understanding of their interactions with us. And that's the direction we'd like to be able to push our own website. Right now, it's a handful of links sort of scattered, and we use that info, but being able to post more information that you can use within your office. We know that these sort of presentations are always a training tool, but being able to put the right information in your hands, or the right information one click away, whether it be relating to distributions or remittances or definitions, whether it be a place that we can post the handouts that Elise has demonstrated earlier, whether it's a place that we can post our calendar so that you know what's coming up with our office. There are upgrades that we are planning for our website. Now, as with most things, I can think of everything that I can think of. As we start to roll it out, if there's more information that we should make available, contact information, calculation information, detail information, historical information, we'll likely end up leaning on this group and the various associations to be able to direct traffic. What is useful to be able to find, right? Or what would be useful for it to be centralized in a single place. So whether it's information we are posting or whether it's information that we can centralize that's available at the state level, it is an upgrade that we are looking at. Now, the big one of, it's weird coming back to a position that you held once before. The spruce goose, right? The great white whale is upgrading settlement. Is upgrading settlement. The upgrades that were talked about should feel pretty straightforward. Easy things that we can do that maybe make a little bit of a difference, but nibbles, or as my father would say, bird bites, right? Things that we can do to improve the process. But I always feel like no matter how hard we try, the two of us will be a choke point and a bottleneck for the 92 of you. So one of the projects that we are in the very early stages of considering is, how do we move the settlement process out of spreadsheets and emails and back and forth to Gateway? The abstract, I think, gives us an effective model that we can consider. Settlement is a little bit more complicated of a process, more forms, more calculations, a little bit more interaction. But with the abstract being solved, I'm confident that we'll be able to come up with something very similar for the settlement. Submission, electronic review, the questions being provided to you instantaneously. It's still the same procedures that we've gone through in the past. We've just taken the bottleneck out of it. We think about settlement, if we think about settlement sort of broadly, while the property tax and excise, fit and CVET are all being reported on through Gateway, settlements may be the last piece of the property tax cycle that isn't available to the public, right? The totals are, but not the forms, not the refunds, not the calculations associated with it. We've had the preliminary conversations with your tax and billing vendors. This is something we are not planning on rolling out this June, but it is definitely a direction that we are going to be moving in. It's a direction that we are excited to move in, to try to find a way to automate this process. Instead of looking at ways that we can save minutes, hopefully ways that we can save hours in taking you through this process every 6 months. Okay, and then last slide. Paul touched on it, Dan touched on it, Elise touched on it, so I won't spend too much time talking about it. But if settlement to Gateway was sort of what the left hand is doing, what the right hand is very excited about doing is this fund consolidation. A single uniform chart of accounts across all political subdivisions is, I think I told Elise that whoever pulls this off is going to be the person that gets a statue in the courthouse. Just being able to very easily reduce the reporting requirements, can link the values and the funds that DLGF is using with the ones that Board of Accounts are using. What you're budgeting for is also what you're reporting against. That connection between the two, in a former life, the questions we would get about projected property tax distributions were all based on what the budget order was, before the circuit breaker had been calculated, before the first tax bill had been paid. By connecting those two pieces, imagine the reports that the state will be able to create. Here's what was advertised. Here's what was adopted. Here's what was certified. Here's what was billed for. Here's what was collected. Here's what was distributed. And here's what was reported on the AFR. This single consolidated fund structure is being designed to have that particular conversation or to meet that particular need. Now, that is what we're hoping to sort of be able to produce. Though the one thing I would add to the remarks that the other folks talked about is the way the project is being handled is, I think, the best way to handle a project of this size. There's an accounting group that's meeting to talk about the nuts and bolts of it. There's an IT group that's meeting to talk about the sort of the computer requirements associated with it, both at a local level and at a state level. There's a legal component to it, and there is an executive steering committee made up of Comptroller's Office, Board of Accounts, and DLGF to make sure that once there is a single unified chart of accounts, we make sure that it stays a single unified chart of accounts, and that the day after we sort of roll out the last brick, we don't start moving in two different directions again. It is something we look forward to working on. It is something I think you're going to be very excited about using. More updates to come in the future for sure. Okay, we've gone a little bit over my time, but I want to turn it over to Janie Cope, who's going to take us. Through an introduction to excise.
They're really testing my technology skills here today. So if you see me turn around a little bit, it's because I'm not sure what's behind me. Okay? Okay, Janie Cope here. For some of you that don't know me just a little bit, I've worked in the Comptroller's Office now for 19 years, starting my 20th year. And before that, I worked at the county in northern Indiana for 12 years. So I kind of have a little bit of an idea what goes on in the auditor's office. And as you can see, today we're going to provide some information about excise taxes, including a deep dive into the excise tax allocation worksheet that Fred is working on an update for, but we still have to have it. And also then the excise reconciliation worksheet. And then at the end of the presentation, we're going to get into some frequently asked questions about excise tax that our office receives. When we refer to settlement, a lot of times we refer to, property tax. Well, excise tax is a part of the distributions for settlement. And if you look there, we've got a list of the 6 settlement forms that will include excise information. Now, excise is a little bit unique as compared to property tax, whereas property tax, you have a piece of ground, right? And you have a house on that maybe, or a building or a structure. It's assessed. Property tax is billed. You receive it. It's a piece of property. You can locate it. That's where those tax dollars go. That's where they're assessed. That's where they're received from. And where they're located, that's who gets the money. But excise tax is different because it's based on an individual. For example, I have a car. I decide that I want to drive the car, so I have to get it registered and get a license plate. So I go to the B&B, I get my license plates, and when I'm there, I have to pay the B&B some fees and excise taxes. Then later on, the B&B will send to the county, they'll remit to the county some of those excise taxes, not getting into the excise tax replacement credit. And then they also provide forms on their FTP site for you all to use for the breakdown of how to allocate those dollars to which taxing districts. And it would be nice if everybody in the world knew what taxing district they live in, but they don't. So we know that sometimes those reports aren't as accurate as they could be, no fault to the B&B. But keep in mind, I just said the excise tax for your plates. There are other types of excise taxes that are collected and distributed. Some by DOR, some by B&B, and some by our office. We'll touch on this quite a bit, but remember, a portion of those excise taxes also are remitted back to the state. And I'm going to go over that later. That's part of the why we have the form, the excise tax allocation form, because it helps calculate that portion. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about why that happened, how it occurred. Okay, that lovely chart that Fred pulled together kind of opens your eyes. In the last 3 years, you see how much has been collected based on your 22s. I should say not collected, distributed to the units. based on your 22s that were provided for property tax, excise, license excise, FIT, and CVET. In the past 3 years, you've distributed $1.7 billion in excise tax. So it is a large part of revenue for everybody involved. So now we get ready to dig deeper into the excise tax allocation worksheet. And you'll notice all of our forms have lovely long names. Okay, don't get discouraged. We're going to review this sheet, and then I'm going to go into, like I said, the history of it, why it came about. It's required every settlement, and it's submitted with the other settlement documents. I turned my phone down, but it'll probably do that too. It happens. Exactly. I gotcha. So that worksheet is going to determine the amount of excise that you're going to distribute to your units, right? You enter that on your Form 102s, which ends up on the 105. And then it's also going to calculate the amount to remit back to the state for funding for some of the welfare funds and some of the school funds. And trust me, the budget agency keeps a close eye on this. They bug me frequently. Oh, no, excuse me. They request information frequently. Now, one of the problems with presenting on a form is there's no way I can make this big enough for you to see. We've all experienced that in the past. So what we did was we decided, okay, the excise tax allocation worksheet basically has 4 sections. Section A is where you're going to see your taxing districts. Section B lists 4 types of excise tax that are included in the calculation of the welfare and school fund deduction amounts that you're going to reduce. That's what you're going to send to the state. But then in Section C are these allocation factors. Once again, we're going to go through that tells you, that takes that amount of excise tax that you listed, takes it times your allocation factors to determine how much comes to the state. And then in Section D, there are 3 types of excise tax that are not, statutorily, they're not a part of that calculation for the tax fund, state fund deduction amount. So let's look at Section A. We do have a little bit of a screen print there. Yeah. So you'll see at the top, like on a lot of our forms, we have a drop-down box so that a lot of your data can be pre-populated. So you just click on that, select your county, and all the taxing districts are going to show up. So you don't have to do data entry. Then in Section B, there are 4 types of excise tax that statutorily are a part of that calculation of the state fund deduction amount for welfare and school. And when you're completing this form, you're going to go to your excise tax ledger, right? And you're going to enter your total for each taxing district for each of those amounts or each of those types of excise tax. And here we list those types again, in case you missed it. And I would recommend that you always, when you're getting ready to do this, verify the amounts that you're entering agree with what's on your excise tax ledger. Easy enough, because you're manually entering it, easy enough to make a typo, to transpose some numbers. It's supposed to be a 7 and you entered a 9. Happens a lot. Then in Section C are those state fund deduction allocation factors. We decided to use that term instead of using the old SWETA 2009 welfare, 2009 school deductions. Few words. So when you chose your county in Section A, you're going to see automatically populated these allocation factors. And those allocation factors will remain the same for perpetuity until there's a change in the statute. You don't have to enter anything in this Section C part. And once it's completed, we'll go to Section D, and that's where you're going to see the 3 types of excise tax that are not included in the calculation of the state fund deduction amount. Gave you another list there of exactly which ones. Auto rental, which is something you've had for a while. Heavy equipment rental tax, I like to call heavy metal. Just started, I don't know what, 5-6 years ago. And vehicle sharing excise, which is always the enigma one that, okay, vehicle sharing. And then this way, now we've got all of your excise accounted for on the excise tax allocation worksheet. This section with these 3 is the section that is the most missed on completing the excise tax allocation worksheet because it's off to the side, it's at the very far right of the form, and it is easy to miss. You don't want to miss putting that money in there or that amount in there because you want to distribute, right? You don't want to short any of your units. You don't want to short the county, for one thing. So it is really important that you make sure that that gets completed. Now, sections B and C, right? That calculates the amount to remit back from the state. And I bet you're all wondering why we need to do that. Well, spoiler alert, it's coming up. There were 2 in the last 20 years, 2 changes in shifts in tax policy on the excise tax. That affected the distribution amounts, and we're going to go through those. The first phase, if we go back in our time machine to 1999, in Senate Bill 59, Public Law 273, which is really interesting. If you ever want to look at these, you can find these online. It required the calculation of the, I'm going to get it here because I don't want to just read it. You have to calculate the state welfare allocation, and that was just for welfare. It took over, there were two welfare funds that were no longer being funded by property taxes. So back in the day, when you would get your rates from DLGF, you would have a rate for these welfare funds, and that would be a part of the tax bill, and you would distribute that money. Well, this is doing away with that. So that dealt with property tax, but you still had to consider excise tax. So those funds still needed to be funded with excise tax. So the way that that was calculated, the state auditor's office at the time took the 1997, 1998, 1999, 3 years worth of those welfare fund rates, added those together, then added 3 years worth of the taxing district rates, and then divided the fund rates by the taxing district rates, and that gave you the allocation factor, which once again, those will remain static until the law changes. Now we get to phase 2, and we get to go back into our time machine and move up about 10 years. There was another statutory change for the remaining 5 welfare funds to no longer be funded by property tax, and 2 school funds no longer to be funded by property tax. So once again, they still need to be funded by excise tax. Followed the same basic process, except it went back 3 years, so that would have been the 2006, 2007, 2008 fund rates. Add those together, 2006, 2007, 2008 taxing district rates, added those together, divide the fund rate total, 3-year fund rate total, by the 3-year taxing district total to get your allocation factor. And that's what we did with the welfare funds, right? We took all of the fund rates for the welfare funds, added those together, the taxing district rates, added those together. Then when we get to the second part, which was for the school funds that are no longer funded by property tax. Do I sound like a broken record? And basically followed the same process. Took the 3 years worth of fund rates, added those together. Am I on the right slide? And then you divide that by the total of the 3 years of the fund rates to get the allocation factors. Once those factors are there and you've completed section B, you're going to get an amount in the in the last column of section B. That's the amount of excise to be distributed to the taxing units after it's been deducted by the amount that you're going to send back to the state, is the easiest way I know to put it. And at the bottom of the form, which I will have a screen print later of that section, it'll show you the breakdown. It automatically pulls in how much is going to welfare, how much is going to the school. That's the amount you remit to us with settlement. And we have that information so we can verify the data. We have the documentation to deposit it. So I know that was fast. Any questions? Okay. So now, and keep in mind, that form really needs to be completed before you even get ready to calculate your settlement distribution, right? Because otherwise you don't know how much to enter for your 102s for excise tax to distribute. This next form, the reconciliation with the treasurer, if it were me, I would do this also before I provide the breakdown for each district, because you want to make sure you're actually distributing what's there to distribute. So you need to balance with the treasurer. So that all being said, once you have the allocation worksheet finished and the treasurer has completed their portion, they enter their collections on the 49TC and they have a total amount, I think it's towards the bottom of column C, of their total excise. Then you can complete the reconciliation sheet. And the purpose is basically to make sure that the auditor and the treasurer agree not only on what's to distribute, but what's left over in the fund. Because your cutoff date is different than the treasurer's cutoff date, or it should be. County auditors, you all know the value of reconciling data. Very important part of your job. It's used to ensure the accuracy of the excise tax, verifies the amount being distributed to the units, and to the state. But best of all, it ensures the starting point for the next settlement. If you have a variance and you don't find it and make whatever corrections are necessary, and it may be a small amount, but over time that will compound. And then you're 5 years down the road and you get audited and the Board of Accounts says, you got $200,000 in excise sitting here. Why hasn't that been distributed? And then you got to try to find it. Well, it's a whole lot easier if you reconcile frequently. And when you find it's just $500, a little bit easier to track down than $200,000, because you don't have to go back as many months. So on the worksheet, we got a little screen print there. There are 10 lines on the recon worksheet that you need to complete. Am I on the wrong slide? Okay, I'm good. I think I flipped the paper wrong too. There we go. Are we good? I told you I'm technologically challenged. This guy is not. He's bringing a wealth of ideas to the office. Okay, so now you're going to complete the 10 lines on the reconciliation worksheet. On that workbook that we will send you, there's a separate worksheet that says line descriptions. A lot of verbiage that explains what each line that you're filling out, what it represents or what it should represent. We're going to go through each one of those lines. The first thing, you should put your county name at the top, right? No brainer. Then we ask that you put the cutoff date for your office, for your excise. A lot of counties, it's usually either the end of March, the end of April, and then the end of either October or September or October in the fall. Long as it's consistent, it's okay. But we do ask that you put in the complete date, and we use that later on so we can calculate what we will assume will be a variance amount that we expect to see at a certain point on the reconciliation. Basically, it's going to tell us how much you probably have collected after your cutoff date. So line 1. Easy peasy. It's the amount the treasurer certified in excise tax on the 49TC. It should be all of the other types of excise that we've gone over. It does not include wheel and surtax. I know not everybody has that, but just to make it clear, that is not a part of settlement at all. Statutorily, it's distributed in a totally different manner, totally different timing. We're just going to move on. Line 2, excise tax advance totals. You know, did you advance any of the excise tax to any of your units, to the schools who always ask for money, right? If you did that, that amount would be entered there. On line 3, the excise tax to be distributed at settlement, well, you just calculated that on the excise tax allocation worksheet, right? And the final column is the amount that you're going to list for each district, and the total that you're going to distribute in excise tax goes on that line. And just keep in mind, even though when line 3 says minus, the way the form's set up, the formulas, just put it in, everything on this sheet gets entered as a positive number. Formulas later will do the subtraction. Are we at line 4? Good. Okay, another minus. Watercraft refunds. Very rare, but they do happen. If your county is in a situation, I think Steuben probably has the largest amount of watercraft revenue. They have a lot of watercraft there. That's where you're going to enter that amount of that refund. It's paid, it's similar to your 17Ts, right? You refund a taxpayer their tax dollars, you pay it out of county general. At settlement, you get the money back and you quitus it back to the fund. And that's what you're going to do here. The settlement instructions give a little bit more detail on this. Typically, you would write the check at settlement. Say it's the Van Dorp Township that we're taking the money from to pay back county general. So when on the excise tax allocation worksheet, when you have an amount in the watercraft excise column, you're going to reduce the amount in the Fred Van Dorp taxing district so that you've got that money set aside, and then you'll quitus it back into county general. But that is a part of the calculation. They don't happen very often, but if they do, we have a place to account for it. And if you need help with anything, feel free to reach out. So now, something else you already know. The welfare and school excise tax allocations, that's the amount you're going to remit to the state. This is a screen print of what's at the bottom of the excise tax allocation form that tells you how much you're going to remit back to the state. So that one should be also easy because you already have the data. All of these actually should go fairly well. Line 6. That's where we're going to see our first calculation of differences. We expect to see something there because what the treasurer certifies, let's use our example, you cut off the end of April. Treasurer doesn't certify collections until June 1. So you've got a couple of months worth of excise tax being distributed to the county that you're not distributing yet. You're going to distribute that next settlement. So this is definitely a reconciling, a reason that you're going to have a different amount. We don't ever expect this to be 0. It really should not be 0. So now what are we going to do with that amount? Well, we got to figure out what makes up that amount. So line 7, and if I have to read this, bear with me, my tongue seems to get tied on this one. It's excise tax replacement credit included by you, the auditor, in the excise distribution, but is not included in what the treasurer certified. So there's a whole lot of words there, but the easiest way to think of it is I, the auditor, included it. It's not in the treasurer's number. Then line 8 is minus the excise tax received after the auditor's cutoff date, and that's something we referred to earlier. So that would be that amount that you cut off April 30th, and that's going to be the amount the treasurer received after your cutoff date, before they when they certified. Sometimes it could be simpler to just throw a number in there so that your reconciliation comes out to 0. Not a good call, okay, because you're not actually reconciling. You really need to go back and verify that amount. Now, that means working together with your treasurer, and you can check what you show they should have received against what they say that they received. I got 5 minutes. So line 9, similar to line 7, where it dealt with property tax replacement credit that you received and you entered. Am I talking too much? Okay, thanks. See, I have to have notes because I tend to ramble, and I have to have Fred here because I tend to ramble. Okay, so, and you all can shake your heads because we know. Okay, so line 9 is the excise tax other than excise tax replacement credit that the auditor includes in what they're distributing. The treasurer did not include in the certification. Very similar. Very rare that you would have a number in there, but it is there just in case that happens. And line 10, woohoo, that's where we know, do we reconcile with the treasurer? We've accounted for every which way excise could go. And we want to see it 0. I put the formula in there. This is how the spreadsheet works. It takes that line 6 difference amount. You add in the excise replacement credit included by auditor, not the treasurer. A lot of words. Other excise tax included by the auditor, not the treasurer, and subtracts the excise tax received after the cutoff date. So hopefully you've got a reconciled difference of 0. If it is not zero, you need to go back and do some investigating. And we've got some tips we're going to give you here. It's not all inclusive. You just need to go back and see if you can find it, right? So that moving forward, you're good to go. Next settlement, you're perfect. I cannot stress enough about fudging the number on line 8. Don't do it. Lori's shaking her head, saying it's a very, very bad thing. And if any of you are Seinfeld fans, very bad. Very, very bad. Babu. And what happens, though, is if you force that number, then you're probably going to either over or under distribute to your units. And let's face it, especially at your level, township level, you need every penny you can get. So we need to provide that. Now, it's not moving. Well, isn't that just fussy? Okay. So here are just some ideas we had of how you can see if you can verify the difference. Do I do it again? I am short. Come on. I was hitting the green button. Not me. Yeah. Can't help you there. There you go. There we go. Thanks, Stacy. Okay. So these are some helpful tips. First of all, of course, review the worksheet for data entry errors. I've spent hours sometimes myself trying to find where I transposed a number. Verify that the excise tax that you, the auditor, are distributing for the different types. Make sure it agrees with what was on the cash book the date of your cutoff date. Compare the receipts from the treasurer to the excise tax ledger. And verify the amounts recorded on the treasurer's cash book for all types of excise after the auditor cutoff date. This is your line 8 amount. Make sure that that agrees with the distribution reports that you, the county auditor, received from the DOR, BMB, and our office. Once again, not all inclusive. You may have another idea, and that's okay. One more. Okay. So now we're going to get into the frequently asked questions, one of my favorite acronyms. Okay, one more. There we go. Okay. I get this question a lot. So I did not get a report for my aircraft excise distribution that I just got. Can you provide that report for our county? Well, no, because we didn't initiate the payment. You got to reach out to the Department of Revenue. There is an email address that you can use, and someone there will get back with you just as soon as they can. They're usually pretty responsive. It's like magic. Okay. Same thing, but I didn't receive my watercraft or boat excise report in August of 2024. Where is it? Well, watercraft payments come from the BMB, so guess who you need to contact? And if you've never heard her name before, you would contact Tamitha Cooper at the BMB, and I have her email address up there. And when you get your excise tax replacement credit, you look at it and say, oh, my daily report for the excise tax replacement credit doesn't match the amount in the summary report for that day, report number 1234. What's up with that? Well, the first thing you should do is go back to the FTP site, look at the report for that date, because sometimes that report gets changed after you've already looked at it and you're not aware of that. Yeah, it happens. I won't give you my opinion on that, but if you go out there and you look at that report and it's the same amount, then reach out to Tamitha. And if you would, please copy us on it so we're aware, because we're obviously the people that did the distribution, so we're going to need to know. Our treasurer received an ACH for vehicle sharing excise. Is there a report where I can get the breakdown? Well, no. I've got the code in there. It basically gives guidance for whoever is paying that, the taxpayer that's paying that, to the DOR. They only have to identify the county. They don't have to identify the taxing district. And because of that, they send it to the county, and then you get to figure out what to do with it. Our office, a few years ago when this started, had a couple of suggestions where you can just apportion the money out to all of your units or put it into, say, your largest taxing district. For most counties, it's not a lot of money. There's a couple that it's a little bit more. This is my favorite one. There's no column on the excise tax allocation for me to enter the wheel and surtax. Is there a reason for that? Anybody? I know Lori knows. Wheel and surtax is not a part of settlement, right? It's distributed totally differently, not a part of any of the forms, not a part of your distribution. And last but not least, there's our contact information. If you have any questions, I know we're running short. I'll be out at the table the rest of the day. Tomorrow, Fred's going to abandon us, and he's going to go back to the office so we can make sure your excise distribution gets out. I may get fired after this. But really, he is so much fun to work with, I got to tell you. If you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to us. And I'm going to take a little bit from Elise here and say we are and continue to be at your service. And it's great to see you all. I will admit, you all keep me sane. I love coming here and seeing everybody and talking to you on the phone. I may not recognize your face, so please feel free to come by and see me. And for that, I will shut up. Thanks for your attention.
I don't know, is that yours? Is it worth anything? No? Okay. All right, got a couple announcements before we release you. I was just going to announce that. Did you want to? Okay. All right, so first things first is the handouts that you all went out to go get. They have emailed them to the association. The association will be emailing them out to you, so they should be in your inbox within the next couple days. Today? Oh, it's there now. So if you check your email, it's there now. Oh, tonight. Well, some of you just lied to me. But that's okay. All right, so be on the lookout for those. I think the only announcement that we have is that lunch is going to be served. My understanding is it's a gourmet box lunch, right? They are available in the vendor room. You can bring it back in here to eat, or you can eat out and about, and then we will reconvene at 1 o'clock.